Hello, and welcome to the Total Mental Performance Podcast, the one and only mindset podcast dedicated to helping fitness entrepreneurs and coaches master their mindset, giving you insider access to industry leaders around their psychology, their campfire stories, and the mindset required to be successful in this business. I'm your host, Kieran O'Neill, mental performance coach and founder of Total Mental Performance, the world's fastest growing specialist mindset service dedicated to the fitness industry. So, without further ado, let's lean in and listen. Hello and welcome to the Total Mental Performance Podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, the man, the myth, the legend. And I say that a lot, but this guy is a genuinely a legend. Nathan Johnson. Nathan, thanks for jumping in, mate.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mate, we're going to have fun.
Yeah, we are.
That coffee we had the other week was that. Basically, we were having a coffee in Amara Lounge here in Dubai. And I was so fascinated by your mindset, the depths that you've gone, whether that's in therapy, in coaching. And I just thought, you know what, I've got to get this guy on. So, mate, thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure. As I said on my Instagram stories today that I think this is one of those where if you ask me the right question, I think I'm going to cry. It feels like a session.
Pressure now.
Yeah.
That's how I know if I've achieved the objective.
Yeah.
So if you could describe in one line, what it is that you do?
Change people's lives. Just, as basic as it can.
Nice.
Yeah.
What got you into changing people's lives?
I was in the quest of changing my own life through many different ways. I was fat when I was younger, so I always wanted to get in shape. I had a knee issue when I was younger, which meant that I couldn't do much. I had osteomyelitis, which meant that now I'm still waiting for a knee replacement. I'm only 29, so the detriment and the deterioration was so hard that it made me look at things differently. I wanted to be physio. When you're in a distress state or probably a trauma state, you actually want to you don't want people to feel the way that you ever felt like that. So whether that was me trying to diet or trying to help myself get in shape, or with the knee, it was a case of I don't want anybody to feel the way I wanted to or the way I did. So therefore, I will then now go forwards and do everything I can so people can't feel that pain. And that's kind of the deeper core reasoning. And then the rest of it is just because I was kind of good at it, I enjoyed it, and then the rest of it just drove into that purpose-driven, combine the two between if you're good at it and you like it and you also get gratification because you are helping people, it's a recipe for success.
Yeah, result.
Yeah.
And there's something interesting in that. So you said you didn't want people to feel how you felt. Obviously, there's a physical ailment, which is, oh my God, that hurts. But what was the more emotional, psychological side that you wanted to help people out of?
It was the stress of feeling helpless, because when you have that injury that you're sitting, effectively I was sitting on the sidelines watching other people play sport or even walking. I used to get pissed off at people for walking because I was like, but I can't do that. And you're like, you're not even taking full advantage of it. You're not even doing a big walk. You're like, oh, I might just get the bus around the corner, and I'm getting angry at that person. So it's like, I just don't want people to feel helpless within whatever ailments or whatever goals they had to achieve, because no one really is. It's just it's a perception that you are helpless.
Yeah, 100%. And how does that translate into your coaching now?
I think it's our coaching speaks for itself in terms of its name. Our name of our company is Autonomy. So giving people control or complete responsibility of their health and fitness. And probably I've just only thought of the reasons and the connections why just now. But yeah, so that it all comes back to giving responsibility so people can actually choose what they want. There's no limiting beliefs. There's no I can't, I'm helpless in my attempts, and then the efforts that they're doing are purposely wasted, but then they never are. They're always learnings. So that's why it always transpires back into fitness, because there's a degree of control with the processes that you do daily. There's always something that you can do towards a goal, towards a structure, a routine that you can just move the needle forwards.
Yeah. And through that, what would you say the hardest part of that journey? Obviously there's the rehab, there's the injury, but like athletes always say about injuries, they kind of write them off really quick. Yeah, well, I got injured and then I kind of did this, but having been an athlete myself that's been through injury or not being able to do what you want to do, like that's hard. So what would you say the darkest moment along that journey? Because now I see you now, like your energy's great, you love what you do, you really have that impact. You're also helping other coaches with their mindset, their businesses, their systems. And I see you now and I think, fuck yeah, but you haven't always been like that. You've had periods where you've had to rebuild. So what would you say was the darkest moment in that period?
I think the darkest moment it was two. One is that initial trauma. And it was only till maybe the last 9 months that I really unpacked that was a significant moment. When you're younger and you're coming home from school, you're crying because someone else is doing sport and you're not. Was a massive moment. I didn't realize what that even meant at that time. I just thought I was being upset, and that was a dark moment. But I didn't realize it was a dark moment. I was 14. I was eating biscuits, finding what girls were, and then playing Xbox, and that was my three major things. And I didn't know what trauma was, or depression, or even just feeling low. I just felt a certain way. I cried about it, and I stayed in my room for quite a long time. And then now I look back at it and go, shit, like that's not normal, or that is not without a cause. And so that definitely, that's probably the one that I bring it back to. But it's only since a year ago, 9 months, that I've realized that was a massive moment.
Yeah.
And maybe another big moment was maybe 6 months ago, when I had a lot of the things that I was going for me. I'd overcome the fat loss issue and the yo-yo dieting and the food binge eating and stuff. But then I was in a place of loneliness and in a place of like, I don't know, just no detachment. So I got to that place too. So like, but they all come back to that moment when I was younger, because it all still relates back to the trauma that I had when I was younger, and how then I acted now, and all of the things, my coping mechanisms, my ability to detach is fantastic. Like, if you want anyone to detach, I'm your man. Like, like emotions, no thanks. They're gone.
Yeah. So share only what you share feel comfortable sharing. But of those coping mechanisms, like, how did that transcend from those moments of trauma, and how did they play out? Because often it's very subtle behaviors, whether it is binge eating, whether it is isolation, loneliness, fear, anger, all those different things. It is those little moments, but it's only, like Steve Jobs said on his deathbed, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. So what were like some of the coping mechanisms or some of the behaviors that were coming up that were linked back to that?
Yeah, I mean, you name it, I've done it at least once or twice. So whether it was like chasing the highs of the highs, so the introduction of recreational drugs was fantastic for that, because you take you away from that low, but then actually you get lower because you take too much of it, and then you end up being in a bit of pretty low state. But like the use of recreational drugs, smoking for a while, binge eating was massive for me. Like literally, my biggest one was that in a particular period of no emotional soothing for myself, and no emotions, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd go and raid the cupboards involuntarily. And for years, I used to hate myself because I did it. There was times where, I'd lock myself in my room by barricading the door to be able to not go out. And they were the only times that I ever could stop myself, because by the time you've took the ironing board off the bed, and you took the desk that was in front of take that away, and then you wake up like, what the fuck am I doing? So there was lots of things that I've done that are externally motivated, whether that's like looking at relationships to be that high to take me out of that detachment, or that looking at external methods of buying a Gucci bag or whatever as that method of like moving away from those periods of low or trauma. So I think I've experienced one of everything, and I like to do that anyway. In a good sense, like I do everything once, but the same sense in the coping mechanisms too.
Yeah, 100%. And the binge eating part is really fascinating, because this is something that I struggle to see, is men talking about this stuff. People in this podcast have probably picked up by now that I used to have an eating disorder, binge eating disorder, body dysmorphia, and it's like those cycles of shame. Like, you go and do it, and then you disassociate from the emotions or the feelings that you have, and then you feel amazing, and you're like fine, and then about 30 minutes afterwards it kicks in, and it's like, oh fucking hell, and it can turn into like overtraining, it can turn into cardio, it can turn into all these different sorts of things. And then men really hide that, because eating disorders are for girls. So that's a really fascinating bit, and thank you for sharing that.
So good.
And in that period, how did you pull yourself out of that? Was it speaking to somebody and going to get that help? How did you actually get to the point where you're like, oh, okay, I need to do something about this?
It's an interesting discovery. So maybe 8 years ago, I got my first ever coach, like fat loss coach, fitness coach, transformation coach. And then over time, I moved between coaches whilst I was doing different things, like periods of time. One of my external validation methods was that I did anabolic steroids for a long time. And I got a coach for that. And then it would be, go and do this, take this, do that. But But then I realized every time I'd come to this point where I'd like do it for a period of time, and then they'd all flood back and come back. I was like chasing a new coach, and I thought it was just a coach. I thought it was just like I needed a different method, and I was like, actually, like this is not the coach I need. I need someone, but I don't need this.
Yeah.
So counting my macros or telling me to do the meal plan is pointless if you're then going to go and bang everything in the cupboards, 3 cupboards over, and then you're then trying to do 1,000 calories a day after to make up for it. So I was lucky enough to have someone close to me who we don't speak to now, but we were making that company together, the one that Adam used to work for. We were making like this new way to kind of help people, general population they just seem to get stuck the way that I got stuck. A lot of other coaches have never gone that route. Some just get lucky that they've never had eating disorders or even understand what coaching general population is. So when I came to this point, I said they need something more that is more emotional support, behavioral support, more like routine and structure and time management and all these things that we didn't really offer as a coach, because generally what you do is you focus on nutrition and training and you provide yourself and that you pride it so high. I'm going to give you the best plan. I'm going to help you change this macro, this carb, this whatever. And it got to a point where that doesn't save the people that you're working with when those connections or the dots that you're trying to connect are way deeper than the X's and O's of nutrition and training. So we did a little bit of work on my behaviors, routines, time management, stress, ability. And that helped massively. And that was my first opening to journaling. And then we started to get into journaling. And then I had my first journaling experience, which lasted an hour. And it ended up being 2, 3, 5, 6, 10 pages later.
Wow.
So yeah, it was mental. And then the next minute, 2 hours later, 3 hours later, we were doing way more. So it was one of those in which I understood the power of that now to download and get everything down on paper. So once I had that experience, I then wanted to chase whatever that was. And I knew that wasn't the game. Something that I didn't know, this whole bracket of things that I didn't know that was there. So one of my friends, Elliot, luckily he's been into this type of self-development stuff. And I used to just laugh at him for a while. I was like, oh yeah, meditation, go, like whatever, you know. Yeah. Like, and then the next minute he was going to see a hypnotherapist. And I thought, oh, let's give it a go. You need to waste 60 quid and see if it works. Because in that moment, at the time I was low, I'd had like 4 or 5 days where I binged every single day. I was like, I need to do something. So you overcompensate, you go and book yourself in with someone. And then I ended up learning a lot from that experience. Again, it was like this is different help. This is a different side to things. So then that's explored that a little bit, maybe looking at the core beliefs, what she exposed me to, like you're not good enough or whatever it is, fear of failure. I was like, okay, this is interesting. But I didn't know what to do with it because I've never trained. Everything to do with fitness or my mind, I'd always learned from doing the fitness side of things and always working in that environment. So I knew that side, but I never knew you don't know what you don't know. So after that, which was the big one, about 2 years later, I'd continued journaling, working on my structure, time management, all those beautiful things that help with the ability to how you perceive stress. I then was in a position where I just was not feeling the emotions again, and it just kept coming around in proverbial circles. Then I got myself a therapist. And at that moment in time, the world just opened completely. And now I've been working, I think we're on week 47. I always pay in weeks. So I was like, okay, week 47 this week. And that has been the best experience of my life, probably. Not even from a healing perspective, but from a challenging me to go forwards perspective. You know, it's not just to get rid of the shit stuff, actually, it's to perform better. Well, as you know, right? Total mental performance. It's kind of important over here. So when that started to kick off and we started to look at deeper things, then I knew that therapeutic modality, whatever it was, I was loving it, and it was really, really great for me.
Yeah.
And I every single week I look forward to my Mondays with my second mum, Angela, I call her.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And what you're describing there is so typical of what we see every single day. So we're all looking towards the external world of once I've achieved this, I'll be okay. Or if I'm this size, whether it's physique, I'll be big enough, means I'll be okay. If I'm making enough money, I'll be okay. If I have all of the things, I'll be okay. And it sounds like in your journey, you were looking outwards always. Oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And even when you met this therapist, you're still looking outwards. Yeah. All she did was she just held up a mirror and made you look inwards.
Yeah.
And as you went inwards, that's where the journaling came out. That's where you started recognizing, like, The common human neurosis is we're all afraid of not being good enough. We're all afraid of not being worthy. That's it. Like if you want to figure out the line of code of human psychology, that's what it is. Yeah. And once you start to understand that and how we all have similar issues, but we play them out in so many different ways, it is like that mind blown moment of, oh shit. And what you said is exactly what our clients say, which is, that was one of the most crazy experiences of my life, because all it is it just helps you realize this is how I tick. This is how I operate. This is why I am like I am. And I think this is where the difference is, where being able to take therapy and use it in a performance perspective. You're one of the only other people I've actually met that have done it for that reason. Most people end up in therapy or that sort of thing because they're in a really, really dark place. And you probably went there for the dark place.
Yeah.
Then you stayed for the peak performance stuff.
Yeah.
So if you think about TMP, that's what we do, is we isolate the downside, the self-limiting beliefs, the fear, the anger, the insecurity, the comparison syndrome, all of that stuff we isolate, but the objective of peak performance. Once you start to recognize, oh, if I can control my emotions, and actually if I can transform them, because we can't destroy energy, we can merely transform it.
I love that quote.
Right. Yeah. It's such an interesting thing. But so people think you can delete emotions. You can't. You can change the meaning of certain events, which will then change the meaning of those emotions. So it sounds like you spent that time looking outside, and then it took that person, that coach and therapist, to hold up the mirror and go, you need to look inwards.
Yeah, there was a succinct point of which the therapy turned from one to the other. I just remember it. I remember going and being like, I'm fucked. I'm less fucked. I'm kind of knackered. Now I'm better. Now I'm getting a grip to this. Then it's good. And then, oh, wait a minute. I can see how that links. And now I can see how that links together. And it's like, oh, wait, can you challenge me on this? Or I'm thinking about pricing. Or I'm thinking about the way I structure my team, or I'm thinking about how I operate daily with my financial budget. And then you realize, hang on a minute, that financial budget was limited by the fear of failure, which then, and then you start
going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, because I always say to her as well, because during this whole process, if everyone on the podcast, like during this whole process, I uprooted my life to Dubai. I got rid of a relationship that was in for a year. I got rid of a dog, which was emotional. And I always say to her, just jokingly, I'm like, oh, you made me dump my girlfriend for this. Yeah. It's like, obviously it's just that mirror effect, right? Because I was already unhappy, but you go weeks on weeks and you see, you grasp, and then you see this turning point where it does change from you're running away so hard from something. Now you're running to something because you can see the benefits of it. And that's where I think like it comes from. You get out of that tough spot, but then the same things that got you out of the tough spot can drive you forwards to performance.
What Carl Jung said, where your fear is, there is your task.
Yeah.
And once you start to realize, oh shit, there's gold in that.
Yeah.
Oh, you can just run for it forever and ever and ever. And the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the more you can start to optimize. And let's talk about that part, because you actually coach other coaches as well. You help them with their self-limiting beliefs, with them building their businesses, and you bringing that unique perspective to the table is really rare.
Yeah,
really rare. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I just try and use the perception of what Angela's give to me, what I've seen from you guys, what I've seen from everyone around, is that it all starts internal, as you spoke about, right? And that's where you start with most people. The comparison syndrome of what they see on Instagram, what they think is not good enough within their own business. And then you start just simply asking questions. You know, you ask good questions, you get good answers. You ask shit questions, you get shit answers. So that's all. And my job is not to counsel them or anything like that, but my mere job is to, I've been in your situation. I see the facets in which you could get pulled down in terms of the rabbit hole of like the limited beliefs. All my job is to ask you good questions so that you can answer something and then see it for yourself. Yeah.
And from that perspective, that's where we're talking about you coaching other coaches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they need that more than most people, because they're exposed to a lot of other people and their emotions themselves, and with their emotions, they find it hard to deal with other people's emotions. And then, how do you give a great service if you're so wrapped up in yourself and your ability to manage those scenarios as well?
Yeah. So. Cool. So run me through some of the coaching work that you do. Because I've heard a lot from coaches that come and work with us that have actually been coached by you, and they're always so complimentary. They talk about your empathy, your understanding. So, like, run me through what it is that you actually do.
So, from a coach's perspective, we try and take people through the journey that they're about to coach other people to go through. Because the journey is so multifaceted, it's so diverse in what you can see on a day-to-day basis. You'll want to experience it first. Now, luckily for me, I've had 10 years of trialing and failing, but most people might not have that. So to be able to deal with people that will have failures and will have particular issues, it's always good to go through that process so you can guide them and be the leader effectively. So we'll take people through the coaching process. We will get them in better shape than they have done before, test their levels of leanness, where they want to get to, achieve something amazing, go through the process of like reverse dieting and going into like more of a muscle building phase. But whilst doing that, that just shows the journey of what their client will go through the next 1-2 years of their journey. And then when coaches go through that, when they start to struggle with certain things, then that's when they start learning those things that I will give them or our coaching team will give them. It's the empathy, the understanding, the direction, the strategy, the text on a Thursday morning to see how they're getting on, the emotional work that they need to do, the writing work that they need to do, or just the general challenge that comes back to them, which is my favorite part of the challenge.
So, from a mindset perspective, where do you see the main objections, the main challenges that coaches face when they're building an online coaching business?
I think the biggest one that most people undervalue is time management and the perception of time. So that might, I would class that as a mental attribute. Because they either undervalue how much time that they have or they overvalue how much time they have, they generally then aren't able to work from a routine or structure. They aren't able to be consistent and get the practices in daily that they need to. So then that creates more overwhelm. It creates more panic. It creates more anxiety. Whereas those that do very well do the same stuff over and over again more consistently. And that's just the tried and tested time and effort equals success.
Yeah.
So we just try and get people on the path towards managing their own perception of time and that how they're going to put that into blocks of expressive diarizing and calendar. I'd say that's the biggest one. And then the second one would be, I think, the element of like self-doubt and anxiety, and whether that comes from the perception of being a personal trainer or an online coach, what that actually means, what you have to be this identity. Because almost people get into the industry, they want to help people, but they also have this identity of a personal trainer, which fits a mold of being in shape, never screwing up, hardcore, eating certain things, being outcast of the group of other people. They're doing things that are different to other people because the social norms are a wonderful thing. I love looking at social norms and looking at the digestibility of how you crack them and what you do within them. But when you look at the social norms, personal trainers are normally outcast of that social norm because they're seen as, they've probably dieted around their friends. So therefore they feel like an outcast to their friendship group. And then they don't want to become the outcast. So then therefore they change what they want, their identity, their beliefs, their actions to then fit the common social norm. So I think challenging that. And then once that identity piece of a personal trainer comes in place, that's when you can start making them not feel such an outcast, and like their belief in themselves, their identity is who they want to be as opposed to pleasing others. A lot of personal trainers will flip flop. So in the daytime, they're this identity of an online coach and a personal trainer, and then when they're in the friendship circle, they're whatever those friends want them to be because they don't want the friction of, oh, you're having fucking chicken and broccoli again, or oh, you're not eating with us again, or you're not drinking tonight. And at one point in time, they will have gone through that process of being challenged by friends, and then they will make a decision whether to stand firm on the boundaries of what they wanted at that moment in time for that given circumstances for their goals, or they'll go and say, yeah, well, if you're drinking, I'm drinking.
Yeah.
Or if you're eating, then I'm going to have it too. And they don't want to miss out. And that becomes that oxymoron because then they feel guilt and shame the day after, and it goes around in the cycle of not being good enough, feeds into that mechanism, and then therefore it's a shit show.
Yeah, which then feeds into more overwhelm, which then feeds into overworking, which then leads to burnout. And it's like, I think a lot of coaches forget why they got into the game.
Yeah.
And that the point on time is a really interesting one because it hasn't been raised on this podcast yet. And time is obviously perceptive, right? So with my ADHD, I really struggle with the perception of time. Time doesn't exist. Like we could do what we're doing right now. That's why I've got timers on. Otherwise, we'd be doing this for like 4 hours straight. But we always have more time than we think. And for some reason, coaches feel like they've got to have this massive business. It's like they go, "Well, I'm running a business now." No, you're still a coach. You're still coaching. But because they put that pressure on themselves, they're like, "Well, I'm going to really push for sales this month. I'm going to really grow my coaching business." It really fucking hurts because they forget the only person that's putting the time pressure on is them. And they push and they push and they push, and then they get stuck with not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, which then leads into the overwhelm, the insecurities and the fears, and it kind of goes round and round in circles. That point you mentioned about structure, a lot of the time when a new coach comes to us, the first thing we dig into is what's your structure? What are you doing? How are you spending your time? Like, do you have your days set up? Like, when can a client speak to you? They can speak to me every day of the week. No, they shouldn't. When can a client book in for an initial sales call? Every day of the week. No, they can't. Right. How available are you? And some PTs build their online businesses, but they love the face-to-face stuff. So like have a hybrid of two. And that's amazing because you should never, if you love something, like never give up. Like with Total Men's Performance, with the rate at which we're growing, I'm not going to be able to coach 3 days a week. I coach Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays. My clients know that they're the only days that they can catch me. And it's 2 p.m. till last session is at 9 p.m. Dubai time. So in the UK, that's like what, 11 a.m. until 6 p.m. That's when they can catch me. So as a result, my clients really respect my time. Whereas we're offline PTs, whilst they're doing the online stuff, I'll say, when can they book in? I'll say, oh, well, they can book in pretty much every day. And I kind of trying to switch between two very different skill sets all of the time. So that point about structure is saying, like, first of all, what are your peak performance hours? Like I ask this question all the time. Like I'll ask you right now, when do you fire? When does your brain go?
Between 8 and 12.
8 and 12, right. So once we've identified that, we then ask what your priorities. And you'll say, well, my priority right now could be marketing, it could be building coaching systems, it could be this, it could be that. And it's great. Are you doing it between that 8 and 12? No, the answer is yeah. And I go, really? And I go, no. Well, what are you giving your peak hours to? Well, my offline PT and friends and family. Right. So why are you getting frustrated that the part of the business you need to focus on, by the time you get there, you're burnt out, you're exhausted, you're tired. So then you don't get the results. And it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. It's that point about time and structure, I think is one of the biggest missing keys. And because they're so overwhelmed, they don't think, I can't have time to sit down and plan my stuff. Actually, structure equals freedom. Structure equals freedom. So on that bit, totally get it. I'm really glad that you raised that. And then the overwhelm and the insecurities and the fears and the self-doubts. Like if you're an online coach, that's fucking hard because you're isolated. If you're used to being on a gym floor, having lots of people buzzing around you, then all of a sudden you're behind a laptop and you're just typing away. Like that's tough. That's really tough.
So I really experienced that when I was traveling in 2019. So all this stuff that we do now in COVID, where people are working from their homes, I practiced that for a couple of years ago. I traveled, I think 50 cities in 52 weeks over the course of 2019. And whilst over those time periods, it was amazing and seeing 5 wonders of the world in 1 year, went to a place that I'd never dreamed of, sitting in a hotel room 50 hours a week. And you could have put me in Crawley, you could have put me in Barbados, and you could have put me in Rio de Janeiro, and I wouldn't have known the difference. And that, for me, when we look at the online world and we look at the online space, not only in online coaching, but just generally the trajectory in which most people will be working from home, what businesses they'll be doing and how they'll do it, we do have to consider that this is one of the things that we need to combat in the next couple of 5-10 years. And for me, it resulted in all of those behaviors that I spoke about before, the external validations, the searching for this. The travel became actually an external high. Where am I going to go next week? Because I was so feeling like shit. By Thursday, I was like, I need this excitement to go on Skyscanner, to book a flight, to then feel good about myself, to get there at the weekend, to feel excited. But then I'd come to Monday and I still got 120 people to deal with. And I was sitting in the hotel room and it didn't matter where I was. So for that loneliness piece, I got 7 months in, and then I got to the point where that laptop and that phone was my identity. And I hadn't had a week off in a year or whatever, so I had planned it off in Rio. I was like, going to be amazing. One of my friends is coming over from the US, and then I remember this moment, and it will stick me for the rest of my life. I got upgraded to business class on a a real flight, which basically meant that you got an extra sandwich. It wasn't anything fancy. You got an extra sandwich. And it turns out I binged on that as well. But I shut the laptop and I had this moment where I was like, I don't know who I am. And the identity, everything, I was wrapped up in that moment where I was lonely. I was on my own. I hadn't stopped. And I was just simply didn't know what was going on. And I hadn't caught myself for 9 months being alone in all of these scenarios. And I just felt it all in one of that moment then when it took it into that second sandwich and I closed the laptop and I just didn't know who I was. And that came from that form of loneliness because I'd never experienced it before. I'd always been around PTs. I always used to think I was an introvert because I didn't really like people, but I was too shy to talk to people, so I was quite anxious around people. I didn't know until unpacking it recently that it's like quite a social anxiety around the fear of like saying something and people think you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And I always shied away. I didn't say anything, so I avoided that in all fronts. But actually, I'm a massive extrovert, but I feed off people's energy, and I didn't know that at all. Yeah. But then because I had this like anxiety around not being good enough in social scenarios, I then avoided social scenarios, became an introvert, and I hated the living daylights out of it. And then I made myself more like mentally fatigued because I was lonely about being an introvert to the point where like this year now, like by looking at that loneliness piece and looking at the fact that I actually thrive off other people, and we were having a conversation about this before, we have to be around people. Yeah. And like the camaraderie you get from that, like being in the PT area, having a job around other people, going to a gym where someone knows your name, going to the same coffee shop, Bernadette in Will and Moon down in downtown already knows my name. We've had that chat already, and that these people and you see the subsets, and that's what makes your day, and that's what allows you to fuel. And a lot of people are feeling that at the moment, that loneliness piece, but they don't recognize it because I wouldn't say it's relatively new because loneliness is loneliness, but that feeling has not been expressed to the same degree that we're now exposed to.
There's so much in that I want to unpack. Yeah. Like that moment where your identity, you almost had like an identity crisis. As soon as you shut the laptop, you're like, oh, fuck. What's amazing is like a lot of coaches, their dream is to have that freedom. And I say that with air quotes. Yeah. They have that freedom to travel around the world. Yet there you were, you're traveling around the world, but you didn't necessarily have the freedom because you hadn't set up the business, the way that your mind and body operates. So actually you didn't have the freedom, you were trapped. And then as soon as you shut that down, it was like that identity crisis as, holy shit, who am I? And I call those moments the now what moments. So fucking now what? And we're often looking external to the external world of once I've achieved this, or once I'm doing this, or once I've been here, or whether it's numbers, whether it's physique, whatever. Actually, it's the internal world where you can have the whole of the outside world going to shit. But if you've got your internal world in place and you have your purpose, your mission, your meaning, knowing where it is that you want to go and where you want to get to next, have all of that, you become bulletproof. And Nietzsche said, he who has a why can bear any how. And in my experience, and my clients have seen this time and time and time again, it's true. Yeah. It's the ones that don't know where they're going, and then the going gets tough. It's like, well, what's the ulterior motive to push through that? So that's a really fascinating point. And
flexibility without boundaries is just it's overwhelmed to the highest degree, because in this online world you are so connected that you can do, and it's beautiful that you can do whatever you want whenever you want, but without the boundaries of being able to say, this is when I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to do this. If that flexibility and that going anywhere doesn't matter, like anybody that wants to travel now, that wants to do online coaching and wants to do even just working whilst traveling, the dream is that you go there and you experience the place, but you can only experience the place if you actually have a boundary with the implement that you're working from, whether that's a laptop or phone. You will not feel like I sat on the Great Wall of China with no phone because there was no Wi-Fi in China where I was, and felt unbelievable. But then the other wonders of the world, I had my phone and I was doing check-ins at Machu Picchu. And whilst that was amazing, and that's something to say, oh yeah, I did check-ins at Machu Picchu, and people were like, oh, that's great. I didn't want to do check-ins at Machu Picchu. Yeah. I just didn't have enough boundaries to shut the laptop down to go and do Machu Picchu without that. So you can dilute your experiences if you're traveling, dilute your experiences with your family, dilute the experiences outside of this thing we call work or purpose. If you don't have that boundary of separating the two, it's just that flexibility without boundaries is just basically
it's compulsive.
That's exactly what it is.
It's an addiction.
Yeah,
people don't think work is an addiction. It fucking is. Yeah. And particularly if that's your safe space, like it's easy to stay there. It's easy to stay in the comfort zone of, but I'm in control because I can help people.
Yeah.
The other thing you said that blew my mind was how you're actually an extrovert, but through conditioning was conditioned into an introvert. Because that is literally your body will be screaming for connection and screaming to talk to people.
Yeah.
But your mind and that subconscious line of code that was written, which was don't speak to other people. Yeah. Fuck. If that's heavy, that's hard. That's like, in a way, it's like coming out the closet.
Yeah.
In a very different way, it's just like you're.
I really hope so.
Like it's very different, like you've been craving for a life that you couldn't have. Mm-hmm. So that's very fascinating.
Yeah, there was points in which I would go to events, but before I'd go to these events, I'd be asking who's there, what we're doing, how long we staying for, just like simple signs of anxiety. Like I was just uncertain about the scenario altogether. And then I'd walk into these things, and it was with people I didn't know. You get to know me, you have one conversation with me, and now I'm your best mate, and we'll chat to the high hills, or I'll do anything for you. We'll make a cup of tea, whatever you can have. But in that first initial meeting, I'm like Bambi on ice, and I'm starstruck with nobody that needs to be starstruck with. It's like you're just like, I hope you like me.
Yeah.
And then I remember one specific moment where it was when I was doing therapy, so it wasn't too long ago. It was like when I moved back to the UK. Before I went to Dubai, we were having my friends. We just trained with him, and we used to do some stuff. And basically, I went into his house, and there was like just 4 of his wife's friends there, and I was like, hello, and I was like so in like this introverted anxiety mode that I walked in the other room and just sat there, and I wouldn't go into the kitchen and engage with them because I didn't know how to engage with and I was so like in my shell on that side of things. But now if I look back and I'm like, what are you doing? But that's all I knew. I knew that I just needed to hit the eject button when I got in that social scenario and was like, oh no, I'm marching, I'm going.
And that's the amazing thing. Our limbic system has been built over hundreds of thousands of years, right? Mm-hmm. And whenever it was running that program of social situation, run away, it basically does this thing called evaluation. And what it says is, did I keep this guy or girl alive? Did that behavior keep him alive? And if the answer is yes, you get flooded with relief. And then it rewards that behavior. And imagine if you're drinking a pint and you had a pint every day. First time you have a pint, you'll be pretty smashed. If you drink a pint every day for 30 days, by the time you get to day 30, that pint's not really going to hit you. Well, the body and the mind is the same. So guess what? It starts smashing you with more of those chemicals of fear. So then every time you go into that scenario, more fear. And guess what? When you run away, you're still alive. Yeah. So what does it do? It rewards that mechanism that gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you're in your 20s and your 30s. It doesn't matter what age. Like I work with clients in their 50s and they're it's built up to that point and they've never addressed it. And then boom. And going back to those moments and letting go and updating the subconscious code is just a game changer. That's really, really fascinating. I ask every guest this question. Now, don't think about us as a team, but think about the phrase. What does the phrase total mental performance mean to you?
It means having the ability to firstly bounce back from either challenges mentally, and also be able to prepare forwards for the ability to perform at a higher rate than you have been before, and to be able to weather the challenges that come through that. I think that would be a good way to look at it. That was on the spot. That was good.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for jumping on. We'll have to do a round 2, maybe in season 2
I
or
didn't
season
cry,
3.
so definitely.
Messed up. Next time.
Thank you.
Mate, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.